right, guys, we are going to go over the AFDA complex number test review. So the first section is simplifying radicals. So remember, if you have a negative under a radical, like that right there, that's going to come out as an I. And then the square root of 64. Now you could break that down, or try the square root of 64 in your calculator. The square root of 64 is just 8. So this is going to be 8 and then an I. Now, like I said, if you want to break it down and you want to do 64 divided by 2, you certainly can. You can have 2 and 32. And then divide that by 2, you get 2 and 16. And then you could even think, oh, well, 16 is 4 and 4. You could break it down even more to your 2's and 2's and 2's. So you've got a 4 times a 2, which is what gives you that 8 that pulls out. But again, knowing those perfect squares is super helpful. As a matter of fact, I would always suggest that you give them a try just to see if they are perfect squares or not. So looking at number 2, the square root of 16 is 4, right? So we know that this negative is going to stay on the outside. We know that this becomes an I. And the square root of 16 is 4. So the negative is going to be out there, and then we have the 4, and then we have the I. So our answer is negative 4I. All right, let's look at number 3. The square root of 9 is 3. So this 2 is going to be on the outside. This is going to become the I. This is going to become the 3. So we have 2 times 3i, or 6i as our answer. Okay? So our answers are 8i, negative 4i, and 6i. All right, well, let's look at number 4. So if we do the square root of 126, we see that, oh, it is not a perfect square. So we do have to do our little chart with that. So the negative is going to become an I. The 126, well, 126 divided by 2 is 63. Now, 63 isn't divisible by 2, but it is divisible by 3. And then 21 is also divisible by 3. So you've got this combination that goes on the outside. Now this 7 and this 2, they don't have a pair, so they don't get to go out. They have to stay in. So the things that are circled get to come out. The things that are in the square have to stay inside. So a 3 comes out because it's one group of 3. You've got your I. And on the inside, you have a 2 and a times 7, which is 2 times 7 is 14. You get 3i, the square root of 14. Now you can double check your work there. If you have 3 the square root of 14, it's 11.22 blah, 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 blah. Well, if you did the square root of 126, it should also still be equal to the exact same decimal. So you can check your work to make sure that you've got it. Just leave that I out, because obviously we don't want to put that in our calculator. All right, let's look at number 5. So number 5, negative 3 is already out, so it's going to stay out. The square root of 18, nope, not an actual number. So we got to leave that, and we got to do our little table. So the negative is going to become an I, because it's under the radical. And 18 divided by 2 is 9. And 9, you divide that by 3, and you have 3 times 3. So the 3 comes out, the I comes out, the negative 3 is out. This 2 stays inside. So we'll have a negative 3 on the outside that's already there. We've got this 3 that comes on the outside. The I is on the outside. The 2 is left over on the inside. Well, negative 3 times 3i is negative 9i. And the square root of 2 stays inside. So you get negative 9i, the square root of 2. So remember, things that you circle come out. Things that you don't circle stay inside the house. All right, so let's look at number 6. For number 6, you've got this negative 8. That's going to stay on the outside. You've got this negative. Well, that's going to become the I. the square root of 108, whoops, the square root of 108 is 10 all right, so clearly we got to break this down. So 2 goes into 108 54 times. 2 goes into 54 27 times. 2 doesn't go into 27, but 3 does. And 3 goes into 9 3 times. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got here. We have a pair of 3s, we have a pair of 2s, and then we've got this 3 left over by itself. So it doesn't have a pair, so it can't come out. So circled things are outside, squared things are inside. So outside, you have a -8 times a 2 times a 3 times the I. And then inside, you have the square root of 3. So the -8 stayed, the 2 came out, this 3 came out, and it didn't matter if you paired these two together or if you paired these two together. You're still going to have a pair of 3s with a 3 left over. And then this 3 stays inside. So we have -8 times 2 times 3, leaving the I out of the calculator. You end up with -48I, the square root of 3. All right, so that's the section of simplifying radicals. Let's move on now to the section of adding or subtracting to simplify the expression. Now, remember, when you're adding or subtracting, you're just combining your like terms. So you want to combine your regular numbers first. -6 plus 3. So you put -6 plus 3 in the calculator and you find out that it's -3. Then you want to combine those things that have i's. So you have a 5 minus a 10. Now notice I'm not changing any signs because I'm not crossing an equal sign. I also didn't put I in my calculator. I just put the 5 and the -10. It's kind of like when you're doing x's. You don't put the x in the calculator, not putting the I in the calculator. So 5 minus 10 is -5i. So your final answer is -3 minus 5i. All right, let's look at number 8. Number 8, regular numbers comes first. Well, there's nothing to add or subtract with the 6, so it's just coming first. Then we look at our 2 that have the i's on them. You have a 3 and a -8. Well, a 3 minus an 8 is a -5, so that's minus 5i. So your final answer is 6 minus 5i. Now, number 9 is a little different. Number 9, you've got this negative sign, and then you've got a parenthesis, which means that negative sign has to distribute to those things inside the parentheses. So the 2i stays the same. You get a -6 minus a 3i. Now, this is our term without the I, so it comes first. And these two things are the terms with the I, so that's a 2 minus 3. Well, if I put 2 minus 3 in the calculator, I get -1i. The 1 does not have to be there, so when you're doing multiple choice, the 1 will not be there. Okay? All right, number 4, same kind of deal. Looks the same as number 9. So you got to take this negative and you have to distribute to the things on the inside. So that's a 4 minus an 8 plus a 2i. Because a negative times a positive is a negative times a negative is a positive. Now the 4 and the -8, you have to put those together. That's a -4. There's nothing to go with the 2i, so you just leave it. -4 plus 2i. All right, now moving on to 11, 12, 13, and 14. Now, I want you to notice that inside the parentheses, in between them, there is a plus or a minus sign. Please don't get this confused with the next page. The next page, 18, 19, and 20, notice that there's no sign in between them. So this means you're multiplying. So you're going to FOIL these, but for these problems, 11, 12, and 13, you're adding or subtracting to simplify the expression. So with this adding, it means that a +1 distributes in. Well, a +1 doesn't change anything. So this is just 3 plus 2i plus 15 minus 3i. Nothing has changed. All right, now 11 looks exactly like number 7. The first thing you want to do is you want to put together your numbers. Well, 15 plus 3, or 3 plus 15, is 18. A 2 and a negative 3 is a negative 1. So it's minus 1i. And again, the 1 doesn't have to be there. All right? Now, number 12 is the exact same kind of problem. So if you want to hit pause and give it a try, you certainly can. Let's take a look. So the plus sign distributes. So the plus sign distributing doesn't do anything, but a plus and a minus. A positive 1 times a negative 3 is just negative 3. A positive 1 times a negative 8 is just a negative 8. Combine our like terms. 6 minus 3. Well, 6 minus 3 is going to be equal to 3. Then we have a negative 4 minus an 8. Well, that's going to be negative 12i, because those two go together. So you end up with 3 minus 12i. Notice that in all of these, I've got the number first and then the i's second. All right, 13 and 14. Things are a little different because in 11 and 12, we were distributing a positive 1. Okay, well, look at 13 and 14. We've got to distribute a negative. Well, a negative sign is going to change the signs of all these things that are in the parentheses afterwards. The 10 minus 4i stays. This becomes a negative 3 plus an 8i, because a negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Now that you've distributing that negative sign, just like you did with number 10, now you're just combining your like terms. 10 minus 3 is 7. A negative 4 plus an 8 is a positive 4. So you get 7 plus 4i. Now you're going to do the same thing with 14. So if you want to hit pause, you can go ahead and give it a shot. So what you're doing is you're distributing that negative. So a negative times a negative is a positive 6. A negative times a positive is a negative 9. So now we want to combine our numbers together. A 15 plus 6 is a 21. A 2 minus a 9 is a negative 7. So you get 21 minus 7i. So that was adding and subtracting to simplify the expression. So let's look at the next one. The next set now says multiply to simplify the expression. Now you need to remember that I times I is I squared, and I squared is equal to negative 1. So what that means is anytime you get an I squared, it's going to change the sign of the number. So if we have 8i times 3i, well, 8 times 3 is 24. I times I is I squared. Now remember, I circled that and I said, oh, well, that I squared is really negative 1. So what that's going to do is make your final answer negative 24. The i's go away because I squared is equal to negative 1. And 24 times negative 1 is negative 24. All right, let's look at 16. 16 we need to distribute. Negative 2i times a negative 4 is a positive 8i. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. And there's just one I there. Now this next one we have to do negative 2i times negative 3i. Well, negative 2 times negative 3 is a positive 6. And I times I is I squared. Now remember, anytime you see I squared, that goes away and you're left with a negative 6. So you would like to say 8i minus 6. But remember, especially when we're doing multiple choice, they're going to put the regular number first. So it's going to be the negative 6 and then the plus 8i. Now, if you accidentally write 8i minus 6, that would be fine. Just make sure that when you're doing the multiple choice, you're looking for something that also says negative 6 plus 8i. Just make sure your sign goes with the right number. All right, 17 is the same way, so if you'd like to try it, hit pause. You certainly can. All right, let's take a look. We're distributing the 4i. 4i times 3 is 12i. 4i times negative 7 is a negative 28 I squared. So that means that this is going to change to become a plus 28. So that means we have 28 plus 12i. All right, let's continue multiplying on the next page. Number 18. Number 18, now remember I pointed out in the last thing, you've got to make sure you realize that there's no plus or minus in between those parentheses. So looking at number 11, you had a plus sign in between the parentheses. Looking at number 14, you had a minus sign between the parentheses. This is not foiling. This is called combining your like terms. This does not have anything between the parentheses, so this is where we foil. You take your 7 and you distribute it to both things in the other equation. So 7 times negative 2 is negative 14. 7 times 4i is a positive 28i. Now you take the 3i and you distribute it to both things inside the parenthesis. So 3i times negative 2 is a negative 6i. And 3i times 4i is a positive 12i squared. Now you got two things to do. This I squared means that this is going to become a negative 12. Now once you've changed the sign of that I squared and made that a negative 12, now you're going to go back to the very beginning and combine your like terms. So we have a negative 14 minus a 12, which is going to give us negative 26. We have a 28i and then a negative 6, and that's going to give us a positive 22i. So we have negative 26 plus a 22i. All right, moving on to number 19. Now 19 and 20 are the exact same thing, so if you want to hit pause and give them both a try, you can. We'll go through them. All right, so negative 3 has to distribute to both of these. Negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. Negative 3 times negative 3i is a positive 9i squared. Now we're going to distribute the 2i. So 2i times 6 is a positive 12i. 2i times a negative 3i is a negative 6i squared. This is going to become a positive 6. So now, you put your numbers together. We have negative 18 plus a 6. That's going to give us a negative 12. And then we have a 9 plus a 12 to give us a positive 21i. So negative 12 plus 21i. All right, number 20. Same thing, distribute. Negative 4 times 12 is a negative 48. Excuse me, negative 12 times positive 3i is a negative 12i. Distribute your negative 2i. You have a negative 24i and a negative 6i squared. That becomes a plus 6. So negative 48 plus 6 is a negative 42. Negative 12 minus 24 is a negative 36. So you end up with a negative 42 minus 36i. All right, 21 and 22, they look different. They actually turn out to be the exact same as 18, 19, and 20. You just have to do one extra step. That extra step is to write them twice. That squared means that it's 8 minus 4i times 8 minus 4i. Now you FOIL just like you did with 18, 19, 20, and 21. So 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 4 is negative 32i. And then you multiply it again. Negative 4 times 8 is a negative 32i. Negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16i squared. Now, the positive 16i squared becomes a negative 16. So we have 64 minus 16, so that's a 48. And we have a negative 32 minus a 32, which is going to give us negative 64i. So 48 minus 64i. Now, the same thing is going to happen to number 22. So again, if you want to hit pause and give it a try, let's go ahead and take a look at it. Negative 3 plus 5i times negative 3 plus 5i. We FOIL that. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Negative 3 times 5i is a negative 15i. 5 times a negative 3 is negative 15i. And 5i times a 5i is a positive 25i squared. This will become the negative 25. 9 minus 25 is a negative 16. And a negative 15 minus 15 is going to give you a negative 30i. So negative 16 minus a 30i. All right, our last section really of the year is simplifying exponential expressions. Now, remember, you've got a series of 4 things. You've got I to the 0 is equal to 1. You have I to the 1 is equal to I. You have I squared is equal to negative 1. And you have I cubed is equal to negative I. So 0i, negative 1, negative I. Okay? Now, this is an open notes test, so you can have this with you when you're taking the test. So let's look at number 23. You want to divide 23 by 4, the long way, not in your calculator. Remember, it doesn't work in your calculator. You do 23 divided by 4, it's just telling you that it's 5.75, not helping us out. So, what we want to do is we want to do 4 into 23, okay? So, 4 goes into 23 5 times, because 4 times 5 is 20. That leaves you with a remainder of 3, which means I to the 23 is equal to I to the 3, which we know is negative I. So our final answer for number 23 is negative I. All right, let's do the same thing with 24. 4 goes into 42 how many times? Well, 4 goes into 4 one time. Pull this down. 4 goes into 2, and you don't even have to have that 0 there. But 4 goes into 2, no times. That's your remainder. So I to the 42 is equal to I squared. And we know that I squared is equal to negative 1. So negative 1 is your answer. Now, if you want to hit pause and try 25, 26, and 27, you can. I will continue on with them. All right, so number 25, we're doing 4 into 53. Well, 4 goes into 5 one time, and 4 goes into 13 3 times, because 4 times 13 is 12. So that means I have a remainder of 1. That's I to the 1, which we know the answer is just I. All right, let's look at 108. So 4 goes into 108. Well, 4 goes into 10 2 times, because 4 times 2 is 8. So that's a 2, pull down your 8. 4 goes into 28 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. That means our remainder is 0. So that means I to the 108 is the same as I to the 0. So our answer is just 1. All right, and our last one. 4 goes into 125 how many times? Well, 4 goes into 12 3 times. 4 goes into 5 one time, with a remainder of 1. So, I to the 125 is the same as I to the 1, so your answer is just I. All right, that finishes up the review. So now that you're done with the review, I hope you've written down all the answers so you can use these answers and things to help you with your test. Good luck with the test, and once you're done with that test, you're done with AFDA. Now, once you finish the test and I put in the grades and all that, if you're not happy with your final grade and you want to go back and fix something that you got a low grade on that I told you you could fix, you're more than happy to. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Bye.